Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. This is episode 1144, sharing what to know and where to go in Metro Detroit. I'm Jer Stays, and today we're talking in depth about the District Detroit. The $1.5 billion multifaceted project near Comerica Park and Little Caesars Arena in downtown has some big numbers attached to it. It would involve the construction or rehab of 4 residential buildings, 4 office buildings, 2 hotels, and the University of Michigan's Detroit Center for Innovation. That's 1.2 million square feet of office space, 146,000 planned square feet of retail, 865 residential units, and 467 hotel rooms on the planning board right now. Developers Olympia Development and the related companies project there will be 12,000 construction jobs and 6,000 ongoing jobs at the site. To make that happen, developers are also asking for nearly $800 million in incentives spread over the next 3+ decades. There's also a community benefits agreement involved. So with anything so large and involving a mix of state and local support, there will be questions to be asked. My guest is Keith Bradford, the president of Olympia Development, who joins me now on Daily Detroit. This is a conversation I've wanted to have for a while, Keith, so welcome to the show.
Jared, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. People have a ton of questions around this one. And my first question will be, why now, right? Because this project's kind of had a little bit of fits, starts, different visions. Why now to lean into this in this manner?
There's a couple of reasons for why now. One is that this is coupled with the Detroit Center of Innovation. This is the academic center that we're partnering with the University of Michigan with to bring a whole new education component to the District Detroit. Now, not that we haven't already been in that arena. We've got the Mike Gillett School of Business with Wayne State as part of the district already. But this additional academic center with the University of Michigan, I think, is an added catalyst to an already vibrant district, that's very sports and entertainment focused. I think that is an exciting component that will bring new opportunities, not only students and faculty, but new businesses, new organizations that want to be a part of that. It's just a natural occurrence that helps drive the economic engine.
So about that, what percentage are we talking about as this development is going to be about this Detroit Center for Innovation?
It's at the end of Columbia Street, right at Grand River is where the academic center will be located. And that campus will be comprised of a residential facility as well as an incubator building. So that incubator site will be there for new business opportunities, that maybe are spun up out of the academic center. And so you can start to generate new ideas, new types of technology, maybe new business models that can come out of there and then generate new businesses. Cornell Tech, based in New York, has been around for about 7 years. I'll give you that as an example. And in that 7 years, they've had over 80 businesses, start up out of that same type of model. And, our hope is that type of model will generate new businesses here in Detroit, and then they actually stay in Detroit, right, and start to fill up, bring new opportunity for Detroiters. So that's the 3 buildings of the campus. And then the rest of the development is, I'd say, more Woodward focused as we start to fill out the street wall of Woodward with office, residential, hotel, et cetera. All of it's complementary. All of it's to build this urban fiber, walkable city, but you've got this anchor of the academic center on one end of Columbia Street, and then you've got Comerica Park at the other end. So I think they complement each other quite well.
One criticism I've heard is that, in some cases, some people might think that this is too dense or too big of a scale for Detroit. Why do you think this level of density is important when it comes to this commercial, retail, and residential?
We believe that the density is needed for it to actually scale appropriately. I joined Olympia Development 5 years ago, and while we've had a lot of development, it's been a building at a time, whether it's the Mike Gillett School of Business or our Little Caesars headquarters building, 2715 Woodward, the Eddystone, et cetera. Those all have been built almost one a year over the last 4.5 years. But while that's great and sustained, what it doesn't do is create a critical mass to help support retail, as an example. And so, as we've seen, for example, with the pandemic, with people working from home, then retail starts to struggle if people aren't coming into the office. And so what this allows to happen is when you build an office and then right next door you build a residential tower for those people working in the office to live, and they can literally walk across less than a block into the office work, now you've got an ecosystem that can support all day parts, right? It can support lunch, business, and a retail location, and then also you have the nighttime activity to support it for there on out. So we think it's the combination of all of these together that actually works and creates the critical mass versus building one building at a time over 10 years.
Yeah. In recent reporting, I talked to a number of business owners, and they shared with me that, especially ones that have interest in the suburbs, that their suburban locations are doing better than their downtown location because there are more residents nearby, especially in places like Birmingham, that help create more of a 24/7 cycle as opposed to just the ins and outs of the games or the offices, which have taken a pretty big hit in the last few years as far as the amount of people in the office spaces.
Traditionally, a suburb, location would be a residential drive into the suburb, then turn around and drive back home, right? And what this allows for, from an urban perspective, is really what we've heard and seen that we've seen for a number of years, right? Of businesses moving down to an urban environment because the younger generation is wanting to live and walk to work and be a part of the nighttime offerings that, say, a city would have. In fact, in 2715 Woodward, BCG and Warner Norcross Judge, they joined and were the first tenants in that building for us. And that's exactly the reason they wanted to be down here in the heart of the action, so to speak, is because that age demographic was wanting to be a part of this urban core.
Are there any cities or places that inspired your designs?
It's interesting. There's a lot of great examples of this, and I used New York with Cornell Tech as an example of an academic center that's done that. But we've also seen that take place with Amazon's HQ2 in Crystal City, Virginia there, where they've seen a significant amount of growth. Now businesses moving in to be adjacent to that. With Related as our partner, they've had a lot of success, right, with transformational developments, Hudson Yards being an example of that in New York, where they were able to build a critical mass in a short period of time with tremendous success. So all of those are, I think, great examples of what we're trying to recreate in a relatively short period of time, 5 years.
Yeah. And so what about now will supercharge this development to do all this in 5 years as opposed to the one building a year, that you said over the last, 4 or 5 years? What's the difference to make this go faster?
Well, I think I spoke to one of those, right? The academic center from the University of Michigan. I think that's a critical piece of this. There is a significant demand today for residential and particular affordable housing within Detroit, and we're very, very proud of the residential that we're bringing forward. We're bringing almost 700 rooms with 20% of those being affordable. Some of the most deeply discounted affordable ever being offered in the city. We're at 50% of the area median income there, where traditionally what you're required to build is 80% of AMI. So we are excited about that, and we know that demand will be there. We also know that the city needs more hotel rooms, particularly if you want to land events, like the Final Four, for example, in March Madness. The city has been short of the number of hotel rooms, and we know that demand's there. We have at Little Caesars Arena, for example, it's the second busiest arena in the country, right behind Madison Square Garden. And, a hotel adjacent to that would be phenomenal experience for those visitors that are coming into town, and they can stay right next to the arena, and they don't have to take their spending outside of the city because now they can spend their money right here in Detroit.
So that leads me to the third part, though, office space. It's not just you. Bedrock as well has a lot of office space planned in what they're doing. What is it about office space? Because right now the trends seem like people don't want to go back to the office, that they're not as inclined to do that. In fact, a number of companies that I talk to are downsizing their spaces. They still have footprints, but they're downsizing. So what is it that you see that shows that amount of office space that you're going to do is going to be filled up in the future?
Great question. And it is one that we're often asked about, particularly what's been going on post-COVID. What we've seen is that a lot of people have continued to work from home, but corporate America is looking for is a new type of workspace. And that's what we're able to bring forward. Class A office space, more light, larger floor plates, and obviously HVAC systems, mechanical systems that create a cleaner, I will say, healthier environment than maybe what people have perceived in the past. And I think those type of products will actually entice people to come back to work. We're seeing it. I mean, already with the office buildings that we have, people are wanting to come back, but they are looking for a different type of environment than maybe what was historically there. So that's one. I do think it's going to, new type of product in the market will start to attract people back into the office. And then two, again, I hate to keep using it over and over, but we're also finding that there's a desire to be associated with the academic center. We believe a new office demand. And then third, I would say as we've been out there pitching to corporate America about this project, one thing that really resonates is the amount of talent that exists in Southeast Michigan, particularly young talent and diverse talent that exists here. And as they're looking for opportunities to expand and grow their organizations, they're looking to how to tap into that kind of talent. And too often in the past, as we know here in Detroit, that our young professionals, as they graduate college, not only as they got their degree, they were also buying a plane ticket and they were going to Chicago or New York or LA. And we want to reverse that trend. And new office product, new types of industries, new types of businesses can help do that and reverse that trend. And frankly, I will tell you that is probably the number one selling point when we're talking to people is they are extremely excited about that opportunity to tap in the talent base that exists here in Southeast Michigan.
Will some of the designs reflect the possibility of a more hybrid future for some companies?
No doubt. I mean, and what's great about this is, while we are building a different type of floor plate maybe that exists 50 years ago, we can also take feedback from those tenants that are wanting to look at how they want to incorporate and what amenities are they looking for. And so it's absolutely something you want to take into account. One of those amenities, though, is they want to have a vibrant, I keep using the word urban core, but that is something they want. They want restaurants and retail to complement the workspace that's adjacent, where people work. But also they're looking for this collaborative space because a lot about coming back to the office is about building culture and how do you be creative. It's really hard to be extremely creative over a Zoom call, but in person where you can meet, exchange ideas, and also make sure that your organization's culture is being lived out is a critical piece, and that can happen through design as well.
So it sounds like the people, not just you, but also the people you're talking to, they're really envisioning more people going back to work than in the past. It may happen over time, but they feel like that trend is going to move towards back to the office. At least that's what I'm getting from these conversations that you're relaying to me.
That is our hope and our belief that will occur. We've seen that trend start to change already in downtown Detroit. 21, 22 increased significantly. We'll see what 23 leads to. But we're seeing it in our own businesses within the Illich organization, whether it's obviously the sports entertainment businesses as busy as it's ever been, and operations teams are here working every day, sales teams and marketing teams are in the office daily. And the same goes for Olympia Development. We're down here on a daily basis, making sure that as we invest in a downtown, that we are here working in that same downtown.
All right, well, let's talk about community benefits and incentives. This is a crux of the project that I feel like if there weren't as many incentives involved, I don't know if it would be, such a discussion point, but there are close to the tune of, nearly $800 million. Why are those incentives important to get this project done? And I guess I'll flat out ask, if those incentives aren't there, is the project feasible?
Jared, thanks for the question. It's an extremely important question, and I think many times incentives are misunderstood because they're complicated, frankly, and they just are. So I appreciate the opportunity to address this. First and foremost, this is $1.5 billion worth of development, private equity up front. So it's us putting in the money, us and our party related, putting in $1.5 billion towards these projects. And then the way the incentives are structured is as each individual project is built, there are transformational brownfields, abatements of property taxes, those kind of things, that if the product is delivered, then there is some reimbursement of those. So those taxes don't exist today. In fact, it's the increase in the value of the property that allows for those property taxes to occur, and then some form of those are reimbursed back to the developer to help incentivize what frankly is below market returns. I mean, today, it's unfortunate that I think Detroit has the third highest tax burden in the United States in terms of a city. And then those taxes, along with construction costs that we've seen over the last few years, with unfortunately rates, both office and residential, that don't support the cost structure. And so you quickly get upside down on an economic perspective, and it doesn't incentivize developers to come into Detroit to develop. And so what these incentives do is it does attract developers. It helps them understand. It helps make their projects viable. And frankly, to attract outside investors to want to invest, their financial capital into the city of Detroit, they have to have certain returns or they just aren't willing to do it. And so just to give you perspective, the returns on this project without incentives are just above 2%. That's about how much you can gain in a common checking account today. And you can put your money in a checking account with little to absolutely zero risk, right? A significant amount of risk in a real estate development to earn 2%. And frankly, you won't attract investors to put their money into that kind of project. So the incentives bring that to 4.4%. And even that's not astronomical, but we do believe that, hopefully over time we can start to address construction costs and things like that to get that to returns that investors are attracted to. But again, I want to be clear about these incentives. No incentives are paid out until the buildings are built. And here's the great news about all this. While the $1.5 billion of private equity that goes in up front, this generates over $3 billion of new taxes are generated over the next 35 years. Okay, a significant number.
So that's over and above what the incentive is. That's not minus. That you're saying that's over and above. That's additional. That's the plus side.
Yeah. So the $3 billion is gross, and then you take the developer portion of that comes back, leaves $2.2 billion of net physical benefit to the taxing jurisdictions. Okay. So the $3 billion is generated. Roughly $800 comes back to the developer, and then the net difference stays with whether it's state, city, et cetera. So that's the economic lift for the taxing districts. And I should point out one other point. In the city of Detroit, as an example, the city's general fund puts in $0 over the entire project, and they receive a significant benefit from this. In fact, their annual benefit of this is north of $21 million a year, and over the life of this 35 years, that's $751 million to the general fund of the city of Detroit that starts to provide services to all the neighborhoods, not just downtown. So it's a huge win for the city of Detroit.
So that wouldn't be eaten up by, say, DDA tax capture or something like that?
No, so that's totally separate from DDA.
Okay, because I think that's some of the confusion among people is because they're sitting there going, well, if it's in the DDA, is all the money just going to go straight back to downtown?
Yes, it's a great point, and that does complicate things further. So the DDA, all the property that exists and all the property we are talking about does exist in the DDA. So those taxes are captured within the DDA. So that reimbursement and those incentives are paid out, and that money is captured in the DDA for development such as this. The city, though, will start to get taxes from, income taxes as an example for all the workers and so forth that are coming in, and that does not go to the DDA. And so that's how they will start to capture their tax base through city and corporate income taxes and from the businesses and the employees.
And that's one thing I want to highlight for people, especially those who maybe are not familiar with how Detroit works. In the city, the bulk of the revenue comes from income taxes, a lot from workers coming from the suburbs and, of course, residents as well. This project has both of those. There's more money that comes in through gambling than property tax in the city of Detroit. So, you could debate whether or not that's the way it should be, but that's the way that it is. And so I feel like a lot of these incentive structures, they're balanced towards that system that exists.
That is correct. I should add one other point, since we're on this subject of incentives. One of the programs we're taking advantage of is a state program, the Transformational Brownfield Program. And the overwhelming majority of the $800 million that we talked about total is coming from that program. And so it's state incentives to the tune of $616 million. So that's not even local.
Now, when it comes to brownfield, that's often for remediation or improvements. What kind of challenges are on those District Detroit sites to get them prepped? Because I know that the brownfield credit is often rolled out for those kind of situations, because in urban areas, it's not greenfields. There's often work that needs to be done.
It's typical. There's not an urban site in the country probably that doesn't have some level of brownfield cleanup associated with it, right? Whether it's what was there before, maybe there was a gas station on that site, or a decay of an old building that was there, et cetera. So there's always some level of cleanup, and that brownfield is there to, as you just described, to help offset that increased development cost associated with that cleanup of the site that traditionally in any kind of urban development.
I think people will be encouraged to see that parking lots are now no longer being just parking lots, but being developed. I think that's something, when you talk about density, a sea of parking lots, to me, does not encourage that walkability? Like, are you going to be doing anything to help encourage that throughout the number of properties? Is this the beginning or a genesis of something? Because I think about that in the number of lots that I've gone past, after games or biking through or whatever, because I live in the city. I think about if you're going to do density, it's important that, yes, of course, cars are part of this, but also that they're handled properly as opposed to just, a large lot.
2 of our first 5 buildings are on the parking lots right out in front of Comerica Park. So we have a 500 square foot office building, 2200 Woodward is the first project that we hope to kick off this summer. And then adjacent to it is a residential building, again, with that 50% of AMI affordability that's there. Those are 2 parking lots that are being built on. The academic campus is an entire parking lot that's being redeveloped. That's exactly why they exist today. They're surface lots for now, but the hope is that all these surface lots are future development sites as we go along. Obviously, there's still parking demand that needs to exist because of these residential and office, and we're actually building an underground garage at Comerica Park just beneath those 2 buildings to support the growth that we're talking about. But again, it's underground, and then now you don't have visual obstruction to the ballpark still from Woodward, and so we think that'll be a nice amenity. In addition to all this parking lot development, though, Detroit is well known for its architecture, and there's some phenomenal historic assets that are there too. So there's a number of historical buildings, whether it's the American Hotel, the Fox office building. Many people don't know that there's an office building above the Fox Theater. We're converting that to a hotel. This beautiful, historic gem right there on Woodward Avenue will now be open to the public from a hotel perspective, boutique hotel to complement the theater that's just beneath. So those are some great, adaptive reuses of an old office building that maybe doesn't fit the demands and desires of today's office user and turn it into a brand new revitalized use for that building.
Yeah, personally, when I saw that, I was very excited because it feels like the right kind of use for that space and what to put there, right? Because that's something that helps draw people. I mean, there's so many things that as a city resident, but when it comes to drawing in people from across the region and across the country, people look for those touchstones, things that they know, things that they have histories behind them. So before I let you go, what is your expected timeline on this? What are you hoping for? And when do you think we'll see some things rise up?
As I mentioned, 2200 Woodward is our first project that we want to start this summer. So we're looking forward to that. So once we get through the incentive process, we would like to get that started, the middle of the summer. The academic building with the University of Michigan is another one that we want to get started this year. In fact, we received, Stephen Ross donated $100 million towards that project personally, as well as the state is supporting that with $100 million. And as part of that requirement of that $100 million from the state for the University of Michigan, ground does need to break on the building this year. So those are the first 2 buildings to come out of the ground. And then, we have others coming right in behind that in 24, another 3 buildings starting in 24, with all of them being done within the next 5 years. So those are the first few there. I also want to mention before I lose you is we haven't talked about jobs, and we've talked about them at a high level, but I think it's important for your listeners to understand that there are 16,000 jobs being created here. And that's not insignificant, right? It's 12,000 construction jobs, but it's 6,000 permanent jobs. And that is just going to contribute to an extremely vibrant city of Detroit. We're very, very proud of those.
Real quick, of course, you've got the U of M Center for Innovation, but what are some of the other jobs going to look like?
Yeah, you've got all the office type jobs, fintech jobs, and banking jobs and insurance jobs. You can imagine the types of that, but you've got hotel and retail and property management now, as well as the work that's going on at the university.
Well, Keith Bradford, president of Olympia Development, thank you for your time. I know we went at it a while, but I'm glad to have the opportunity, and thank you for answering these questions.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for having us on.
As always, feedback is welcome. dailydetroit@gmail.com. That's dailydetroit@gmail.com. This is a big project. A lot of people care about it, want to hear what you think. If you don't know already, we publish every weekday on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Be sure to follow us. It is free. Although this is free for you, it is not free to produce. So a reminder that local media requires local support from listeners and sponsors to survive. So if you got something out of this, consider joining us as a member at patreon.com/dailydetroit or a one-time thing and buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/dailydetroit. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.